The gunshot that killed Patricia Shepard on a cold November morning in 1882 didn't just take her life. It shattered 9 souls into pieces that Pierce Shepard didn't know how to put back together. Pierce stood in the doorway of his ranch house outside Quartz Hill, California, watching his children move through their daily routines like ghosts of the people they used to be. 3 months had passed since the accident, since Patricia had been caught in the crossfire of a bank robbery gone wrong during what should have been a simple trip into town for supplies. 3 months, and Pierce still couldn't find the words to fix what was broken. He was a rancher, a man who understood cattle and horses, land and weather. He didn't understand how to heal hearts, especially when his own felt like it had been trampled by a stampede. The oldest, Thomas, was 17 now, and had taken to spending every waking hour working himself to exhaustion. Elizabeth, 15, had become a second mother to the younger ones, her childhood slipping away like sand through fingers. Then came the twins, Margaret and Matthew, 13 years old, and suddenly so quiet it frightened Pierce. Samuel was 11, John was 9, Catherine was 7, little Robert was 5, and baby Anna had just turned 3. 9 children who needed a mother, and Pierce didn't have the faintest idea how to be both parents at once. The ranch was suffering too. 200 acres of good California land, cattle that needed tending, crops that needed harvesting, and Pierce was drowning. He couldn't cook worth a damn. The house was falling into chaos, and he saw the fear in his children's eyes every time they looked at him. They were afraid he couldn't hold them all together. Most days, Pierce was afraid of the same thing. That was the morning Faye Keller walked into Quartz Hill with nothing but the clothes on her back and a carpet bag that held everything she owned in the world. Faye had been walking for 2 days, her feet blistered and aching, her throat dry as dust. She was 24 years old, and she had nowhere left to go. Her aunt, the last living relative who had grudgingly taken her in after her parents died 6 years ago, had finally made good on her threats and turned Faye out. "Can't afford to keep feeding a worthless mouth," her aunt had said, words as sharp as broken glass. "You're a grown woman now. Find yourself a husband or find yourself work, but you're not staying here another night." So Faye had left the small farm outside Bakersfield where she'd been barely tolerated, and she'd started walking. She'd heard there were mining operations near Quartz Hill, which meant there might be work. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, anything. She wasn't proud. She'd learned young that pride was a luxury for people who had choices. The town of Quartz Hill was small, dusty, and baking under the California sun despite it being late February. The main street had a general store, a saloon, a boarding house, a church, and a handful of other buildings that looked like they were held together more by hope than nails. Faye walked into the general store, her last few coins clutched in her hand. The man behind the counter was weathered and gray, with kind eyes that took in her dusty dress and worn boots. "Help you, miss. I'm looking for work," Faye said, keeping her voice steady despite the exhaustion that made her bones feel like lead. "Cooking, cleaning, anything honest." "Do you know of anyone hiring?" The storekeeper, whose name was Howard Webb, scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Well now, that's interesting timing. Pierce Shepard was just in here yesterday, looking desperate for help. His wife passed a few months back. God rest her soul, and he's got 9 young ones out at his ranch. He needs help something fierce, but he hasn't had any luck finding anyone willing to take on that many children. 9 children. Faye's first thought was that it sounded like chaos. Her second thought was that it sounded like exactly what she needed. A purpose. A place. "Where can I find him?" Ranch is about 5 miles northeast of town. Big spread, you can't miss it. But miss, I should warn you, it's a lot of work. Those kids have been through hell, and Pierce, well, he's barely keeping his head above water. I've been through hell too, Faye said quietly. Maybe that means I'll understand them better. Howard gave her directions and, after a moment's hesitation, pressed a canteen of water into her hands. No charge. You look like you need it more than I do. Good luck out there. The walk to the Shepherd Ranch took Faye another 2 hours. The landscape was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, all golden hills and scrub brush, with the distant mountains rising like sentinels against the blue sky. By the time she saw the ranch house, a sprawling wooden structure with a barn and several outbuildings, her legs were trembling with fatigue. She was halfway up the path to the front door when she heard the shouting. "I said I don't want to eat it," a boy's voice, high and angry. "You have to eat something, Robert. Please, just try." A girl's voice, desperate and tired. I want Mama to make it." The sound of crying and then more voices joining in, a cacophony of childish distress that made Faye's heart clench. She hurried the last few yards and knocked firmly on the door. The crying stopped abruptly. There was a long silence, and then the door opened to reveal a tall, broad-shouldered man with dark hair shot through with gray at the temples. He had blue eyes that looked like they hadn't seen real rest in months, and a face that might have been handsome if it wasn't so haggard with grief and exhaustion. "Yes," he said, his voice rough. "My name is Faye Keller," she said, meeting his gaze steadily. "Howard Webb at the general store said you might need help. I'm looking for work and I'm good with children. I can cook, clean and I'm not afraid of hard work." Pierce stared at her for a long moment, taking in her travel-stained dress, her young face with its determined set to the jaw, her green eyes that held shadows of their own sorrows. Behind him, Faye could see a teenage boy holding a small child who was still sobbing quietly, and a teenage girl with flour in her hair standing next to what looked like a pot of thoroughly burned porridge. "You have experience with children?" Pierce asked. "I helped raise my younger cousins before my parents died," Faye said. It was stretching the truth. She'd only helped for a few years, but she was desperate. "I know it's a lot, 9 children, but I'm willing to work hard. I just need a place to stay and enough to eat. I'm not asking for much in wages." 9 children, Pierce said, and there was something broken in the way he said it. 9 children who just lost their mother. It's not just cooking and cleaning, Miss Keller. They're hurting. They're angry. They cry at night. They won't talk to me half the time. If you're looking for an easy position, this isn't it. "I'm not looking for easy," Faye said. "I'm looking for a purpose. I'm looking for a place to belong, even if it's just as an employee. And those children in there sound like they need help as much as you do." The little boy, Robert, chose that moment to start wailing again, and Faye saw the helplessness flash across Pierce's face. Without thinking, she stepped past him into the house. The interior was chaos. Dishes piled in the wash basin, laundry scattered across furniture, the remains of several failed meals in various stages of burning or congealing. 7 of the 9 children were in the main room, all of them staring at her with wide, suspicious eyes. Faye went straight to the crying child kneeling down in front of him. "Hello there," she said gently. "My name is Faye. What's yours?" The boy hiccuped, tears streaming down his round cheeks. "Robert," he whispered. "That's a strong name," Faye said. "Robert, are you hungry?" He nodded miserably. "Well, I'm hungry too. I've been walking for days, and I'm so hungry I could eat just about anything. But you know what I'm really good at making? Pancakes. Do you like pancakes?" Robert's crying slowed. "With syrup?" "With lots of syrup," Faye promised. She looked up at the teenage girl. "Is there flour and eggs?" "Yes, but I tried to make breakfast and I burned it," the girl said, her voice tight with shame. "I can't do anything right. Cooking takes practice, Faye said, standing up, and it's harder when you're trying to do it alone. Why don't you help me? What's your name? Elizabeth, the girl said softly. Elizabeth, I'm Faye. Let's make some pancakes together. Pierce stood in the doorway, watching as this strange young woman took control of his kitchen with a quiet efficiency that made something tight in his chest loosen just a fraction. She didn't ask where things were. She just started opening cupboards until she found what she needed. She talked to Elizabeth like an equal, showing her what to do without making her feel stupid. Within minutes, the smell of pancakes filled the house, and one by one the other children crept closer. I'm Margaret, one of the twins said. That's Matthew, he doesn't talk much anymore. That's all right, Faye said, flipping a pancake with practiced ease. Sometimes words are hard. Sometimes it's easier to just be quiet for a while. Matthew looked at her with something like relief in his eyes. By the time the pancakes were done, all 9 children were gathered around the large kitchen table, and Pierce found himself sitting at the head of it, watching Faye serve his children with a gentle kindness that made his throat tight. She made sure the little ones had help cutting their food. She praised Samuel when he said please and thank you. She listened when Catherine told her a long, rambling story about a bird she'd seen. For the first time in 3 months, breakfast felt like a family meal instead of a battle. After the children had eaten, Faye looked at Pierce. May I speak with you outside, Mr. Shepherd? They stood on the porch, the morning sun warming the air. Faye could see the ranch spreading out before them, could see the potential in this place, even through the neglect that came from one man trying to do everything alone. I need this job, Faye said bluntly. I have nowhere else to go. My aunt threw me out, I have no other family, and I have about 50 cents to my name. But I promise you, Mr. Shepherd, if you give me a chance, I will work harder than anyone you could hire. I'll take care of your children like they were my own. I'll keep your house. I'll earn my keep. Pierce looked at her, this young woman with fire in her eyes and desperation carefully hidden behind determination. Why were you unwanted? He asked. Your aunt threw you out, you said. Why? Faye met his gaze without flinching. Because I was another mouth to feed, and I couldn't bring in enough money to justify the cost. Because my parents left debts when they died, and my aunt resented having to take me in. Because I'm plain and poor and I haven't managed to catch a husband, which apparently makes me worthless. Take your pick. You're not plain, Pierce said, and then looked startled that he'd said it out loud. Faye blinked, color rising in her cheeks. Thank you. But that doesn't change my situation. I need work, Mr. Shepherd. You need help. Can we help each other? Pierce thought about the 3 months of struggle, of watching his children fade a little more each day, of feeling like he was failing at the most important job he'd ever had. He thought about how Elizabeth's shoulders had relaxed while she cooked with Faye, how Robert had stopped crying, how even silent Matthew had eaten a full plate of pancakes. Room and board, plus $20 a month, he said. You'll have your own room off the kitchen. Meals with the family. Sundays you'll have the afternoon off for church or whatever you want to do. If it doesn't work out for either of us, we give a week's notice. Does that sound fair? More than fair, Faye said, relief flooding through her so intensely she felt dizzy. Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. I promise you won't regret this. Call me Pierce, he said. If you're going to be living here helping raise my children, we can skip the formalities. And Miss Keller. Faye, she said. Faye, thank you. I was drowning, we all were. Then let's make sure nobody drowns anymore, Faye said simply. The first few weeks were harder than Faye had expected, and she'd expected it to be hard. The children tested her constantly, pushing boundaries, testing whether she would stay or disappear like their mother had. Catherine broke a lamp and swore it was an accident, watching Faye with wary eyes to see if she'd be punished. John refused to do his chores for 3 days straight. The twins had screaming nightmares that woke the whole house. Faye met every challenge with patient firmness. She didn't try to replace their mother, never asked them to call her anything but Faye, but she showed up every single day with kindness and consistency. When Catherine broke the lamp, Faye helped her clean it up and then taught her how to be more careful. When John refused his chores, Faye sat down with him and asked him what was really wrong, and he'd finally broken down and admitted he was angry at God for taking his mother. When the twins had nightmares, Faye sat with them in the dark, holding their hands and telling them stories until they could sleep again. Slowly, incrementally, the house began to feel like a home again. Meals were regular and edible. Clothes were clean and mended. The children laughed occasionally, tentative at first, then more freely. Elizabeth started to look her age again instead of like a woman carrying the weight of the world. Thomas, who had been suspicious of Faye at first, admitted grudgingly that the house ran better with her there. And Pierce, watching it all unfold, felt something he hadn't felt in months: hope. He found himself noticing things about Faye: the way she hummed while she worked, the way she braided Catherine's hair with such gentle patience, the way she listened to his children, really listened, giving them her full attention like what they had to say mattered. She was up before dawn and worked until the children were all in bed, and he never heard her complain. One evening in late March, Pierce came in from the fields to find Faye teaching Anna and Robert how to make bread. The little ones had flour on their faces and were giggling as they punched down the dough. The sight made something in Pierce's chest ache. "They're natural bakers," Faye said, smiling up at him. "Robert especially has gentle hands." "Gentle hands are good," Pierce said, watching his youngest son beam with pride at the praise. "Means he'll be good with horses when he's older." That night, after the children were in bed, Pierce and Faye sat at the kitchen table going over accounts. It had become a weekly ritual, making sure the ranch was running smoothly, planning for the future. "The cattle are doing well," Pierce said. "If the prices hold, we should have a good year. Enough to hire another hand for the busy season, maybe, take some of the pressure off." "That would be good," Faye said. "Thomas is working too hard. He's still just a boy, even if he doesn't want to admit it." "He's trying to be the man of the house," Pierce said quietly. "Trying to help me carry it all." "He doesn't have to carry it alone," Faye said. "None of you do. That's what I'm here for." Pierce looked at her across the table, this woman who had walked into their lives 2 months ago and somehow made everything better. "I don't know what we did before you came, Faye. Honestly, I don't know how we survived." "You would have found a way," Faye said. "You're a good father, Pierce. Your children know you love them. That counts for more than clean clothes and hot meals." "It counts for something," Pierce said. "But they need the rest of it too. They need someone who knows how to comfort them when they're scared, someone who knows what to say when they're hurting. I'm not good at that part. I never have been." "You're better than you think," Faye said softly. "I've seen you with them. The way Samuel comes to you when he's had a bad dream. The way Margaret shows you every picture she draws. They know you love them, Pierce. That's not nothing." Their eyes met across the table and something shifted in the air between them. Pierce found himself noticing the soft curve of Faye's mouth, the way the lamplight caught golden highlights in her brown hair, the kindness in her green eyes. She was pretty, he realized with a start. Not pretty in a flashy way, but in a warm, genuine way that grew on you the more you looked. Faye felt her cheeks warm under his gaze and looked away first, busying herself with stacking the account books. "I should get to bed," she said. "Tomorrow's baking day, and I promised Catherine I'd teach her how to make pie." "Faye," Pierce said, and she paused. "Thank you for everything." "You don't have to keep thanking me," she said, smiling. "This is my home too now. You all are my family in a way. I'm grateful to be here." After she'd gone to her small room off the kitchen, Pierce sat alone in the quiet house and admitted something to himself that both frightened and exhilarated him. He was developing feelings for Faye Keller. Real feelings, the kind that went beyond gratitude or appreciation. When had that happened? When had she become more than just the woman who helped with his children? He thought about Patricia, about the love they'd shared, and guilt washed over him. Was it too soon? Patricia had only been gone 5 months. But Patricia would have wanted him to be happy, would have wanted the children to have someone to love them. She'd been that kind of woman, generous and kind. Pierce went to bed that night with his thoughts in turmoil, not sure what to do with the feelings growing in his heart. Spring bloomed across the California hills, painting the landscape in shades of green and gold. The ranch work intensified, and Pierce hired 2 temporary hands to help with the cattle. Faye worked from dawn to dusk, feeding not just the family but the hired hands as well, keeping the house running smoothly, making sure the children kept up with their schoolwork. She'd arranged for a traveling teacher to come to the ranch twice a week, a young woman named Miss Harris who taught the younger children their letters and numbers. Elizabeth and Thomas were beyond that stage, but Faye found books for them to read, challenged them with more advanced lessons. "You're wasted as a housekeeper," Thomas told her one afternoon, watching her help Samuel with his arithmetic. "You should be a teacher yourself." "Maybe in another life," Faye said, "but I'm happy here. Your family has given me something I never thought I'd have. A home, people who need me. That's more valuable than any career." "We do need you," Thomas said seriously. "I was so angry when Pa said he was hiring someone. I thought it meant he was trying to replace Ma, but you're not trying to replace her. You're just being yourself. And we need you, Faye, all of us." It was the first time any of the children had said it so directly, and Faye had to blink back tears. "I need you too," she said honestly. "More than you know." In late April, a spring storm rolled in, fierce and unexpected. The wind howled around the house and rain lashed at the windows. Little Anna was terrified of storms, and Faye held her close, singing softly while the thunder crashed overhead. Pierce came in from securing the barn, soaked to the skin, and found them in the parlor. Most of the children were gathered there, drawn by the comfort of being together during the storm. Catherine was curled up against Faye's side and Robert was on her lap. The older children were nearby, pretending to be braver than they felt. "Everyone all right?" Pierce asked, water dripping from his coat. "We're fine," Faye said, "but you're freezing. Go change before you catch your death." "I'll make hot coffee." She gently settled the children and went to the kitchen, Pierce following after he'd changed into dry clothes. She handed him a steaming cup and he wrapped his hands around it gratefully. "I hate storms," Pierce admitted. "Patricia died on a stormy day." "Not weather like this, but still, makes everything come back." "The children feel the same way," Faye said gently. "Anna especially. She remembers being scared that day and her mother not coming home." "How do you know that?" Pierce asked. "She's barely 3. She can't articulate that." "She doesn't have to say it in words," Faye said. "I can see it in how she clings during storms. Children remember more than we think, even when they're very young. The emotions stay with them." Pierce looked at her with something like wonder. "How did you get so wise about children?" "I'm not wise," Faye said. "I just pay attention. I remember what it was like to be young and scared and not have anyone who understood." "Is that what it was like for you? After your parents died?" Faye was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "My aunt made it clear I was a burden from the first day. I tried so hard to be useful, to earn my keep, but it was never enough. I was never enough. So yes, I understand what it's like to be a child who feels unwanted, and I understand what it's like to be alone." "You're not alone anymore," Pierce said, stepping closer. You're part of this family, Faye. Not just an employee, you're part of us. Their eyes met and Faye's breath caught. In the warm light of the kitchen, with the storm raging outside, she saw something in Pierce's eyes that made her heart race. Something that looked like tenderness, like longing. "Pierce," she whispered, and then thunder crashed so loudly it shook the house, and Anna's terrified scream broke the moment. They both rushed to the parlor, where Anna was sobbing in Elizabeth's arms. Faye took the little girl, holding her close, and Pierce gathered Robert, who had also started to cry. Together, they comforted the children, and if their eyes met over the small heads with a new awareness, a new understanding of feelings growing between them, neither of them acknowledged it out loud. But something had changed. They both felt it. May brought warmer weather and the roundup season. Pierce was gone from dawn until well after dark most days, working with his hired hands to move the cattle to better grazing land and mark the new calves. Faye managed the household and kept the children occupied. She started a garden with Margaret and Catherine, teaching them how to plant vegetables and tend them. She taught Elizabeth more advanced cooking techniques. She worked with Matthew, slowly drawing him out of his silence with patient, gentle conversation that didn't demand responses, but welcomed them when they came. One evening, Matthew spoke a full sentence at dinner for the first time in months. "This chicken is really good, Faye." The whole table went silent and then erupted in celebration. Matthew blushed but smiled, and Faye felt tears of joy slip down her cheeks. Progress. Healing. It was happening slowly, but it was happening. Pierce came home that night to find Faye sitting on the porch in the twilight, her sewing in her lap but her hands still, her eyes on the sunset. "Long day?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. "Good day," she said. Matthew spoke at dinner, a whole sentence clear as a bell. "That's wonderful," Pierce said, genuine happiness in his voice. "Margaret told me when I came in. She said it was because of you, because you never pressured him." "It was because he was ready," Faye said. "I just gave him space to find his way back." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky fade from gold to pink to purple. Finally, Pierce said, "Faye, I need to talk to you about something." Her heart stuttered. "All right." "I've been thinking a lot lately," Pierce said, his voice careful, "about the future. About what's best for the children, about what I want for my life, and I keep coming back to the same conclusion." "What conclusion?" Faye asked, barely breathing. "That you've become essential to us," Pierce said. "Not just as someone who helps with the house and the children, but as part of our family. The children love you. I see it every day, and I've come to—" He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "I've come to care for you, Faye, more than I probably should, more than is appropriate for an employer." Faye's hands were shaking. "Pierce." "I know it's only been a few months," Pierce said quickly. "I know it might be too soon. Patricia's only been gone half a year, but I can't help how I feel. When I come home at night, I look forward to seeing you. When I'm out in the fields, I think about your smile. When something good happens, you're the first person I want to tell, and I don't know what to do with these feelings." "I care for you too," Faye said softly. "I have for weeks now, maybe longer. But I was afraid to say anything because I'm your employee, and you're my employer, and I thought maybe I was just confusing gratitude with something else. But it's not gratitude, Pierce. It's real. When I see you with the children, when you smile at me across the dinner table, when we sit together in the evening, I feel something I've never felt before. Something warm and right and terrifying." Pierce reached over and took her hand. His was rough from work, calloused and strong, and it engulfed hers completely. "I don't want to rush this," he said. "The children have to come first. They're still healing, still adjusting. But I also don't want to pretend I don't feel what I feel. Can we take this slowly?" Can we see where these feelings lead, while still making sure the children are taken care of? Yes, Faye said, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. Yes, we can do that. He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, a gesture so tender it made her heart ache. Thank you, he said, for everything, for being here, for caring for my children, for giving us all a reason to smile again. Thank you for giving me a home, Faye whispered, for making me feel wanted for the first time in my life. They sat together as the stars came out, hands clasped, and both of them felt like something broken inside them was finally starting to heal. The summer of 1883 was one of the best Pierce Shepherd could remember in years. The ranch prospered, the cattle were healthy, and his children were happy again. More than that, his children were thriving. Elizabeth had started courting a young man from town, a banker's son named William who was respectful and kind. Pierce had been terrified when she'd first mentioned him, not ready for his little girl to grow up. But Faye had gently reminded him that Elizabeth was nearly 16 and that healthy courtship was normal. She'd helped Pierce set appropriate boundaries and had chaperoned their visits, and Pierce had to admit that William seemed like a decent young man. Thomas was talking about maybe becoming a lawyer someday, inspired by books Faye had gotten him from the town's small lending library. The twins were inseparable as always, but had stopped having nightmares so frequently. Samuel and John had formed a tight bond with the ranch's new puppies, taking responsibility for training them. Catherine had become Faye's shadow in the kitchen, learning to bake and cook with eager enthusiasm. Robert and Anna adored Faye completely, calling her our Faye and climbing into her lap whenever she sat down. And Pierce and Faye were courting in their own quiet, careful way. They took walks in the evening after the children were in bed, talking about everything and nothing. He held her hand. She leaned against his shoulder. They stole small, sweet moments whenever they could, always mindful of the children and their feelings. In July, Pierce asked Faye to come with him to check on the cattle in the far pasture. It was a beautiful day, warm but not hot, with a breeze that kept the air fresh. They rode out together, Pierce on his big bay gelding and Faye on a gentle mare named Daisy. "You've gotten good at riding," Pierce observed, watching her handle the horse with easy confidence. "I like it," Faye said, smiling. "I like being out here seeing all this land. It's beautiful, Pierce. You've built something remarkable." "Patricia and I built it together," Pierce said. "She worked as hard as I did in the early years. It's her legacy as much as mine." "She must have been an amazing woman," Faye said carefully. They didn't talk about Patricia often, but Faye never wanted Pierce to feel like he couldn't mention his late wife. "She was," Pierce said. "Strong and kind and patient. She would have liked you, Faye. She would have appreciated how you care for the children." "I hope so," Faye said softly. They reached the far pasture and dismounted, checking the cattle and the water supply. Everything was in good order. They were preparing to head back when Pierce caught Faye's hand. "Wait," he said. "There's something I want to ask you, and I want to do it here in this place that means so much to me." Faye's heart began to pound. "Pierce!" He took both her hands in his, looking down at her with eyes full of emotion. "Faye, these past months with you have been a gift I didn't think I'd ever receive again. You've brought light back into my house, joy back into my children's lives, and love back into my heart. I know we said we'd take things slowly, but I'm sure now. I'm sure about you, about us, about what I want for the future." He took a breath. "I'm not a young man anymore. I'm 42 years old, I have 9 children, and I'm set in my ways. But I'm asking you, Faye Keller, if you'd do me the honor of becoming my wife. I'm asking if you'd let me love you for the rest of my life, and if you'd help me raise these children not as an employee but as their mother." Tears were streaming down Faye's face. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. Yes, Pierce, I'll marry you. There's nothing in this world I want more. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and when he kissed her, it was gentle and sweet and full of promise. It wasn't like the passion of young love. It was something deeper, richer. It was two broken people finding wholeness in each other. It was two lonely souls finding home. When they rode back to the ranch house that afternoon, they were both glowing with happiness. The children knew immediately that something had changed, and when Pierce gathered them all in the parlor and announced that he and Faye were getting married, the response was overwhelming. Catherine burst into happy tears and threw herself at Faye. Robert and Anna cheered. Samuel and John grinned. The twins hugged each other and then hugged Faye. Thomas shook his father's hand with a man's dignity and then pulled Faye into a rare embrace. Elizabeth cried and laughed at the same time, telling Faye she was so happy, so incredibly happy. Does this mean Faye will really be our mother? Anna asked, her small face serious. Faye knelt down to the little girl's level. It means I'll be your stepmother, she said gently. I will never try to replace your mama, Anna. She will always be your mama and she will always be important. But I will love you as much as any mother could and I will be here for you always. Is that all right? Anna thought about it then nodded. That's all right, she said. Can I call you Mama Faye? The question made Faye's throat tight. If you want to, sweetheart, I would be honored. Mama Faye, Anna said, testing it out. I like it. One by one, the other younger children started trying it out. Mama Faye. It felt right, felt natural. The older children stuck with just Faye, which was fine. The important thing was that they all knew they were loved, all knew they were wanted, all knew they were a family. The wedding was planned for late August, giving them time to prepare but not so long that the waiting became difficult. The whole town of Quartz Hill was invited, and the church was packed on the day Pierce Shepherd and Faye Keller exchanged their vows. Faye wore a simple dress of cream-colored linen that Elizabeth and the other girls had helped her sew. She wore wildflowers in her hair, picked that morning by Catherine and Margaret. She carried no bouquet because her hands were too busy holding onto Robert and Anna, who insisted on standing with her. Pierce wore his best suit and a string tie, his hair neatly combed, his face shining with happiness. Thomas stood as his best man, tall and proud. When the minister asked if anyone objected to the union, 9 young voices rang out in unison. No. The congregation laughed, and Faye had to wipe tears from her eyes. The vows they exchanged were traditional, but when Pierce said, I do, and looked into Faye's eyes, she saw a promise there that went beyond words. A promise to cherish her, to honor her, to build a life together from the broken pieces of their pasts. When she said, I do, and looked back at him, she saw her future. A future full of love and family and belonging, all the things she dreamed of but never dared to believe she could have. The kiss they shared was chaste, appropriate for a church full of people, but it was sweet and full of joy. When they turned to face the congregation as husband and wife, the children rushed forward and they were engulfed in hugs and laughter. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food provided by seemingly everyone in the county. There was music and dancing, and Pierce swept Faye around the makeshift dance floor while their children watched and clapped. Happy? He asked her, holding her close. Happier than I ever imagined I could be, Faye said honestly. I walked into Quartz Hill with nothing, Pierce. No family, no home, no future, and now I have everything. We have everything, Pierce corrected, because we have each other. Because we have this family we've built together. A family out of broken pieces, Faye said softly. That's what we are. All of us were broken, and somehow we came together and made something whole and beautiful. That's love, Pierce said. Real love, the kind that heals. As the sun set on their wedding day, Faye stood on the porch of her new home, legally hers now, not just in her heart, and watched the children playing in the yard. Elizabeth was laughing with William under a tree. Thomas was teaching Samuel a card game. The twins were chasing the puppies. Catherine was showing some of the town children her garden. Robert and Anna were catching fireflies. Pierce came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on the top of her head. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking about how far we've all come," Faye said. 6 months ago, this family was drowning. Now look at them. Look at all of us. We're happy, Pierce. We're really, truly happy. We are, he agreed. And it's because of you, because you were brave enough to walk up to our door and ask for a chance. And because you were brave enough to give me one, Faye said, turning in his arms to face him. We saved each other, Pierce. You and the children gave me a purpose when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I was unlovable. You made me feel wanted. You are wanted, Pierce said, cupping her face in his hands. You're wanted and loved and cherished. By me, by these children, by everyone whose life you've touched. And I will spend the rest of my days making sure you never forget that. He kissed her then, deeper than before, and Faye melted into him. This was her husband. This was her family. This was her home. All the pain of her past, all the loneliness and rejection had led her to this moment, and it was worth it. Every step of the journey had been worth it to end up here, in the arms of a good man, surrounded by children who loved her. The years that followed were full and rich. Pierce and Faye worked side by side to run the ranch and raise the children. Elizabeth married William in the spring of 1884, and Faye helped her plan a beautiful wedding. Thomas went off to San Francisco to study law in 1885, making them all proud. The twins found their own paths, Margaret becoming a talented artist and Matthew working the ranch alongside his father. In October of 1884, Faye gave Pierce the news that she was expecting a child of their own. He'd been stunned at first, then overjoyed. The children were excited at the prospect of a new baby brother or sister. Even the older ones, who were nearly adults themselves, were thrilled. Faye's pregnancy was healthy and unremarkable. She continued to work, though Pierce and the children insisted she take it easier. In June of 1885, she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Patrick Samuel Shepard, honoring both Patricia's memory and one of Pierce's middle children. The baby was welcomed with absolute joy by his siblings. They doted on him endlessly, the older girls fighting over who got to hold him, the younger children bringing him toys and telling him stories. Pierce was besotted with his youngest son, this child born of his second chance at love. "I never thought I'd have another baby," he told Faye one night, holding little Patrick while Faye rested. "I thought that part of my life was over, but here he is, perfect and beautiful just like his mother." "He has your eyes," Faye said, smiling. "All that blue, he's going to be a heartbreaker." "He'll have 9 older siblings to protect him and keep him in line," Pierce said, "and 2 parents who love him more than life itself. He's a lucky boy." "We're the lucky ones," Faye said softly. "Look at our life, Pierce. Look at what we've built. I never dreamed I could be this happy." In the spring of 1887, Faye gave birth again, this time to a little girl they named Patricia Rose, honoring Pierce's first wife and the flowers Faye loved in her garden. Rose, as they called her, had her mother's green eyes and her father's dark hair. She was a calm, sweet baby who rarely cried and seemed to observe everything with wise eyes. The family was complete now, 11 children ranging from grown adults to infants, and a ranch that was thriving under Pierce and Faye's joint management. The house was always full of noise and laughter, always full of life. On their 5th wedding anniversary in August of 1888, Pierce and Faye took a rare evening to themselves. The older children watched the younger ones, and Pierce and Faye rode out to the same pasture where he'd proposed. "Remember this day?" Pierce asked, helping her down from her horse. "I remember every moment," Faye said. "I was so scared and so hopeful at the same time. I couldn't believe you wanted to marry me." "I couldn't believe you said yes," Pierce countered. "A beautiful young woman agreeing to marry a widower with 9 children. I thought you must be crazy." "Maybe I was," Faye said, laughing. "But it was the best crazy decision I ever made." They sat in the grass, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Pierce held Faye close, and she rested her head on his shoulder. "You ever think about that day you walked into Quartz Hill?" Pierce asked. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd gone to a different town if you hadn't come to our door?" "Sometimes," Faye admitted. "But I don't think about it for long because it doesn't matter. I did come to Quartz Hill. I did knock on your door, and my whole life changed in the best possible way." "Mine too," Pierce said. "You gave me back my life, Faye. You gave my children back their childhood. You made us a family again." "We made each other a family," Faye corrected. "All of us together. We took all our broken pieces and we built something beautiful, something whole." "I love you," Pierce said, turning her to face him. "I love you more now than I did on our wedding day, and I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today. You're my partner, my best friend, my heart." "I love you too," Faye said, tears shining in her eyes. "You made me feel wanted for the first time in my life, Pierce. You and our children gave me a reason to exist. You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. You gave me everything." They kissed as the sun disappeared below the horizon, 2 people who had found each other in their darkest moments and built a life full of light together. When they rode back to the ranch that night, they could see the house lit up with lamplight, could hear the sounds of their children's voices carrying on the evening breeze. Thomas was home visiting from San Francisco, and he was playing the harmonica on the porch while Margaret sang. Elizabeth and William were there too, visiting with their new baby daughter. The younger children were running around the yard, playing some game that involved a lot of shrieking and laughter. Patrick and Rose were probably already asleep upstairs, worn out from a day of being adored by their siblings. "That's home," Pierce said, gesturing to the scene before them. "That's everything that matters." "That's our family," Faye agreed. "Our beautiful, chaotic, wonderful family." They rode up to the house together, and were immediately surrounded by children wanting to tell them about their day, wanting hugs, wanting attention. Pierce and Faye divided them up with the ease of long practice, giving everyone the love and attention they needed. Later that night, after everyone was finally in bed and the house was quiet, Pierce and Faye stood in their bedroom and looked at each other with the contentment of 2 people who had found exactly what they needed. "Thank you," Faye said softly, "for all of it, for taking a chance on me, for loving me, for giving me this life." "Thank you," Pierce said, pulling her close, "for walking into my life when I needed you most, for loving my children, for making this house a home again, for being my wife, my partner, my love." They held each other in the quiet darkness, 2 people who had been broken and alone, who had found each other and built a family from the pieces. They had survived grief and loneliness, had overcome doubt and fear, and had created something beautiful together. Outside, the California night was full of stars, and the land stretched out peaceful and prosperous in all directions. Inside, a house full of children slept safely, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and wanted. And in the master bedroom, a man and a woman who had given each other everything held each other close, and thanked God for the gift of second chances. The story of Pierce and Faye Shepherd became something of a legend in Quartz Hill. People talked about the widower with 9 children who had been lost in grief, and the young woman who had been unwanted and alone. They talked about how these two broken people had found each other and created a family that was stronger for having been broken first. Over the years, the Shepherd Ranch continued to prosper. Pierce and Faye's partnership was the foundation of that success. They made decisions together, supported each other through hard times, and celebrated together during the good times. They raised their children with love and wisdom, teaching them that family wasn't just about blood. It was about choice and commitment and showing up every day. Thomas became a successful lawyer in San Francisco, but came home regularly, never forgetting his roots. Elizabeth and William had 4 children and lived in town, close enough for frequent visits. Margaret married an artist and moved to Sacramento, where she taught painting to children. Matthew took over more and more of the ranch operations as Pierce got older, proving himself to be a skilled and dedicated rancher. Samuel became a veterinarian, traveling throughout the region treating animals. John opened a general store in Quartz Hill, competing good-naturedly with Howard Webb. Catherine married a teacher and started a school for girls. Robert became a horse trainer, renowned throughout California for his gentle methods. Anna grew into a beautiful young woman who became a nurse, caring for the sick with the same compassion Faye had shown her. Patrick and Rose, the children of Pierce and Faye's union, grew up surrounded by love from both parents and all their older siblings. Patrick became a rancher like his father, eventually taking over the Shepherd Ranch when Pierce retired. Rose became a writer, documenting the stories of the Old West and preserving the history of families like her own. In the autumn of 1902, Pierce and Faye celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a party that brought the whole family home. All 11 children, their spouses, and more than 30 grandchildren filled the ranch house and yard. There was food and music and laughter, and stories told late into the night. Pierce stood on the porch watching his family, his arm around Faye's waist. They were both in their 60s now, their hair gray, their faces lined with age, but their love was as strong as ever, perhaps stronger, tempered by 2 decades of partnership and commitment. "Can you believe we built all this?" Faye asked, leaning into her husband's embrace. "Look at them, Pierce. Look at our children and grandchildren. We created this." "You created this," Pierce said. "When you walked up to this door 20 years ago and asked for a chance, you set all of this in motion. Every happy moment, every success, every grandchild, it all traces back to your courage that day." "Our courage," Faye corrected. "You were brave enough to let me in. You were brave enough to love again after Patricia died. You were brave enough to trust me with your children and your heart. We did this together, Pierce. Always together." Thomas came up to them, his own children trailing behind him. "Pa, Mama, Faye, we wanted to do something special for your anniversary. All of us kids got together and we commissioned something." He handed them a large framed photograph. It showed the entire family, all 11 children and their families, with Pierce and Faye seated in the center. Below the photograph was an engraved plaque that read, "The Shepherd Family, built from broken pieces, held together by love, 1882-1902. Faye's eyes filled with tears. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Absolutely perfect." "You're perfect," Elizabeth said, coming forward with her own children. "Both of you. You taught us what real love looks like. You taught us that family is what you make it. You taught us that broken things can be mended and made even stronger than before." One by one, the children and grandchildren came forward to hug Pierce and Faye, to tell them they were loved, to thank them for the family they'd created. And as the stars came out over the California hills, Pierce and Faye held each other and knew that they had succeeded in the most important task of their lives. They had loved. They had built a family. They had taken broken pieces and created something whole and beautiful and lasting. Years later, when Pierce passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, Faye held his hand and whispered goodbye to the man who had saved her life by giving her a purpose. She mourned him deeply, but she was surrounded by the family they had built together, and she knew that his legacy lived on in every child and grandchild. Faye lived another 10 years after Pierce's death, spending her time surrounded by her family, telling stories of the old days, and writing letters to her many grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She never forgot that day she had walked into Quartz Hill with nothing but hope and determination. She never forgot the moment Pierce had offered her a chance. She never forgot the journey from unwanted and alone to loved and cherished. When Faye passed away in 1920 at the age of 82, 3 generations of shepherds gathered to mourn her and celebrate her life. The church in Quartz Hill was packed, just as it had been for her wedding nearly 40 years earlier. The minister spoke of her kindness, her strength, her unwavering devotion to family. But it was her children who told the real story. Thomas spoke of how Faye had encouraged his dreams when he was a young man uncertain of his path. Elizabeth spoke of how Faye had taught her to be strong and independent while still being loving and kind. The twins spoke of how Faye had patiently drawn Matthew out of his silence and given Margaret the confidence to pursue her art. Samuel, John, Catherine, Robert, and Anna all shared stories of the woman who had become their mother in every way that mattered. Patrick and Rose spoke of growing up surrounded by love, blessed with a mother who gave everything and asked nothing in return. Faye was buried next to Pierce on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstone read, Faye Keller, Shepherd. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother, she made a family from broken pieces. 1858–1920. The Shepherd Ranch continued for generations, passed down through the family, a testament to the love and hard work of the couple who had founded it. The story of Pierce and Faye became part of the family lore, told and retold to each new generation. It was a story of loss and loneliness, of courage and second chances, of 2 people who had been broken and alone finding each other and building something beautiful together. It was a story of how the unwanted can become cherished, how the widowed can find love again, how children can heal, and how broken pieces can come together to create something stronger than it was before. It was a story of the Wild West, of hard work and determination, of family and faith and the enduring power of love. Most of all, it was a love story. Not the kind of love story that burns bright and fast, but the kind that builds slowly and lasts forever. The kind that survives hardship and grief, that grows deeper with time, that creates a legacy that spans generations. Pierce and Faye Shepherd had found each other when they were both broken and alone. They had built a family from pieces that shouldn't have fit together, but somehow did. They had loved each other through 20 years of marriage and created a life that was richer and fuller than either of them had imagined possible. Their story lived on long after they were gone, in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their blood and their values. It lived on in the ranch that still bore the Shepherd name more than a century later. It lived on in the town of Quartz Hill, where people still talked about the widower with 9 kids and the woman who was unwanted and alone, and how they made a family out of broken pieces. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Pierce and Faye Shepherd were together again, holding hands and watching over the family they had created, knowing that their love had been strong enough to change the world for the people who mattered most. They had taken the hand that fate had dealt them with all its pain and sorrow, and they had transformed it into something beautiful. They had loved, and they had been loved, and in the end, that was everything that mattered. The sun rose and set over the California hills. The seasons changed, and life went on. But the story of Pierce and Faye remained, a testament to the healing power of love, the resilience of the human spirit, and the truth that sometimes the most broken pieces can come together to create the most beautiful whole. They had been widowed and unwanted, but together they had found everything they needed. They had found home, they had found purpose, and most importantly, they had found each other. And that was a happy ending worth every step of the difficult journey that had brought them together.